Welcome back to Meet the Candidate Night, sponsored by the Independent American Party. We acknowledge and are grateful for a large contribution by Patriot Financial and would ask if you have an opportunity to be able to solicit their business. Brandon Waters, you can reach him at 801-864-1156. Now, as we came into the show, we quickly ran into some questions to get a flavor for who the candidates are and how they feel about certain positions and topics. So we want to take a minute to let them have just an opportunity to introduce themselves. And so we're going to start with Tim Aalders, and when he's finished, we'll move right over to Dwayne Vance. Tim?
My name, like he said, is Tim Aalders. I'm running in the 4th Congressional District. And what I've been doing since 2012. In 2012, many people know me, I ran for the U.S. Senate. I've been a COO, CEO, and an operations manager. Right now, I am the operations manager for Tree Haven Homes, a home building company here in the Salt Lake Valley. We won People's Choice Award this year once again. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Since 2012, while other people have been out giving speeches, doing parades, raising money, I was MC at the parade right in the heart of West Jordan, where I was born and raised, and handed out Constitution to the children, because Independence Day is not about me or self-promotion. It's about celebrating our country. While other people was out raising money and giving speeches to Washington insiders, I spent the year of 2013 reviewing every piece of legislation that was submitted by every 50 state, all 50 states, and the federal government, and ranking them on constitutional authority. So while other people was doing this, I followed my passion, trying to protect the Constitution, protect the country, and bring back sustainable debt so that our children won't be burdened and weighed down and treated as slaves by our government. So once again, I'm Tim Aalders. I'm running in the 4th Congressional District.
And I'm Dwayne Vance. I'm a Utah boy through and through. I was bred, born, raised, married, educated, and work here in Utah. In fact, I've lived in Utah my entire life, with the exception of a 2-year stint in Japan as a missionary and about 1 year down in California shortly after law school. I'm married, my wife Cheryl, and I have 3 children, Josh, Sammy, and Shane. Not in that order, and Shane isn't going to let me hear about that. But I've been a lawyer in Park City for the past 20 years. And one of the things I've really enjoyed that my practice has allowed me to do is I'm very heavily involved in nonprofit organizations. I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations up in Park City. Have recently gotten involved with the Rotary Club up there, but have dealt with a number of them. And I just love giving back to the community, and I love this country, and I love the Constitution, and I want to make a difference.
Well, let's address an issue also near and dear to Utahns. Governor Herbert vetoed HB 076, which is the concealed carry permit. How do you feel about that, and what is your overall position about citizens' rights to bear arms? Tim, why don't we start with you?
When Governor Herbert vetoed that bill, I was very disappointed. In fact, I was down at the Capitol lobbying him to sign that bill. I also went to the legislature and I asked them to overturn his veto, which was really funny because most of the legislature here in Utah voted for that bill, but when they had the opportunity to overturn his veto, they showed their true colors and decided not to. The Second Amendment was given to us by our founding fathers to protect our God-given right to bear arms, not for hunting, not for sportsmanship, but to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government. Our government wants to limit our ability to protect ourselves from them. When a citizenry is unarmed, that's the best time to take over that society. I believe 100% I'm a concealed weapons holder. I love automatic weapons. I love guns, but I believe in gun safety, and I believe you should teach your children properly how to react and act around guns. But yes, I support guns, and I really hoped and wished that the Utah government would stand strong for the Second Amendment, which they did not.
And in large part, I agree with Tim. He pretty much hit it on the head. I'm absolutely for the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. It's not limited to just hunting. It's not just limited to military service. None of those qualifications are in the amendment. But at the same time, it has to be responsible gun ownership. And I do believe that similar to your voting rights, which can be forfeited if you're a convicted felon or something like that, you can forfeit the right to bear arms, if you're a convicted felon or something like that. But I don't think disarming the citizenry is going to make this a less violent nation. In fact, it's going to be just the opposite, because if the only ones who own guns are the criminals, that's when we're really in trouble.
A member of the audience asked the question, what do you consider yourself, a moderate, a liberal leaning, or a very conservative Republican? Dwayne, how would you answer that question? And then add the why to that.
Okay. I would probably consider myself to be more of a conservative than anything else. Depending upon the issues, sometimes I could take more of a moderate stance on it, but more than anything else, I would say a conservative, because I do believe that, and it all comes back to the Constitution, and that's where a lot of conservative beliefs come into play here. I think that the federal government should be limited to the very limited scope of powers granted to them in the Constitution, that the state should have the right to exercise all other powers not specifically granted to the federal government. And ultimately, I think that the people should have the right to determine, their own destiny and control their own lives without a lot of interference by the government, be it federal, state, or otherwise. And that the government shouldn't be involved in deciding who the winners or losers are on either a personal basis, on a wealth distribution basis, or on a business basis by bailing out some businesses and leaving others to wither and die on the vine. I think everyone should be given an equal opportunity to rise or fall on their own.
Me personally, I hate when we start placing labels that were created by Republicans and Democrats or the mainstream media. When you start looking at the labels, it doesn't describe me. See, I'm an independent person. I'm one of the we the people. I'm one of the people who gave a little bit of authority to the federal government to oversee certain aspects of our lives. I follow the constitutions. My rights came from God, and we created government to protect those. I'm not liberal, I'm not conservative, I'm not moderate, I'm an American. And as an American, all I want is us to unite and bring our country back to the way it's supposed to be ran. But if you listen to the mainstream media, I'd be labeled a conservative.
Well, Tim, we'll go back to you to answer this question. What role do you think you should play as a Utah representative against pandemic diseases such as Ebola? And how would you address that if you were elected to the Senate?
Well, first off, I'm not a medical expert, and as a representative from Utah, my job is to represent the people of my constituency, then the people of my state when it goes there. If their concerns are with the Ebola, right now, I would call in members of the CDC, and I'd start getting educated on the disease. I'd start seeing what the repercussions could be if we don't address it, what we could do, what we can do better. I'd talk to medical professionals that are dealing in the hospitals in Dallas and ask them what support government can be. And then I'd take that education back to the people of my district and say, this is what they're saying, this is the actual facts of what's going on. But like I said, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't think, there are a few members in Congress who are, but it's not for them to treat medical diseases. The CDC's there to protect it. It's a government agency, but I think it best falls to the medical professionals, research people, and that's who I'd look to get my education and educate the people of my district and my state on that.
The only thing I would add to that, because again, great answer there, it just kind of comes back to highlighting the need to secure our national borders. It's not just a immigration issue, it's a national security issue with all the terrorist attacks, and it's now become a medical issue. And when I talk about securing our borders, I'm not talking about building the Chinese Great Wall and keeping everyone out and just being this exclusionist. But we need to have reasonable measures to secure the borders. It's interesting how the federal government runs so hot and cold, where people are just pouring through the borders like water through a sponge. I mean, it's just nothing holding it back, and then all of a sudden they'll swing the other direction. And now we've got, all of these, screenings and stuff going on at the airports and taking people's temperatures and so forth. Again, perhaps well-intentioned, sometimes swinging the pendulum a little bit too far, one way or the other. I think we just need to take reasonable measures to secure the borders for a number of reasons.
Well, since that topic has come up, Tim, we should ask you, how do you feel about the borders, and what measures would you take to secure the borders?
Well, most people wouldn't understand this. I'm actually a first-generation American. I am the son of Dutch immigrants. Both my parents actually spent time in German concentration camps, work camps they called them, in Holland. And my mother was there because they considered her darker skin. They considered her basically a African American, or African Dutch then at that time, a black woman. So they shaved her head, numbered her, and they put her in a work camp. My parents came here legally. We are a republic based on a rule of laws. And when we start to throw those laws away, we're not doing good for anybody in society. I understand people want to come to our country, but the people that want to come to our country embrace our culture, embrace our Constitution, and provide for their families, well then there are procedures in place for them to come. Right now, our borders being unsecure is open to terrorism, it's open to, like Dwayne said, disease and many other things. I believe if we can go all across the world and secure their borders and fight their wars, we need to start home first and secure our borders. Then if we need to have a discussion on immigration and everything, let's have the discussion. But no discussions can happen until we secure our borders and start following the rule of law, because the rule of law is all we have.
Well, let's go back.
Well, hold on. Let me just weigh in on that real quickly here, because when you talk about securing the borders, it's not just a physical barrier, especially with respect to immigration. When you talk about immigration, number one, the immigration laws just need to be reformed. And on the Colbert Report, I was watching that with my son the other day. He went back and he had a montage that went back for, I think, 10 or 12 years with a couple of different politicians each year. And it was the same thing. Well, we need to have a serious talk about immigration reform. We need to have a serious talk about immigration reform. We need to, finally get to the bit of immigration reform. It's like, the time has come to quit talking about it and to actually do something. Because I'm not anti-immigration. I think immigration should continue. People from all corners of the world have come here and become productive members of the United States. In fact, my ancestors, like many other Americans, immigrated at one point. And some of my very good friends right now are first-generation immigrants, particularly coming up from Brazil and speaking Portuguese. But we need to have a reasonable immigration policy that allows people to do it legally in a reasonable manner. And then, once we have that in place, we need to start actually enforcing it and put up what I would call an economic wall. In fact, Tim's called it an economic wall. He's the one that, he and I have talked about this quite a bit, where you quit rewarding people for coming across the border illegally. You quit providing economic benefits for people who are here illegally. If they cross the border illegally, you don't give them benefits, and they go to the back of the line with respect to legal immigration, so that you actually encourage and support legal immigration.
Let me add one thing that the viewers really should know about, and that is today it was released that our federal government has ordered 35 million visas that they are looking to utilize, and basically it's looked at as an amnesty program. We're told by our federal government all the time there's only 12 million illegals. Well, then why do they need to create 35 million of these new visas and green cards to allow people to be in our country? This is another one of those circumstances where Obama's looking to circumvent Congress. And where's our members of Congress paying attention to this? Where's everybody campaigning, paying attention to this and speaking out against, hey, I have no problem with people who come here, like I said, embracing our Constitution, embracing our culture, and wanting to be here. But to just reward people for violating our laws without vetting them, because one of the agencies stated today there's no way they could vet that many people in our country and see if they violated any laws. So that's a concern that I think people should start paying attention to.
Well, let's go to this issue of executive orders. After all, the president has been noted for writing many executive orders. Dwayne, how would you address this as a member of Congress, and what would you do with your fellow mates, in the Senate, to bring this issue of executive orders back to where it belongs?
And just some clarification on that. Both Tim and I are running for the House of Representatives, which is one of the bodies in Congress, but we're not running for Senate, at least not this time. But anyway, with that, it all comes back to the checks and balances and the separation of powers. And I think, well, for some very minor issues, there is an appropriate use of executive order, but when an executive order is basically usurping the role of Congress and is essentially taking on the role of making laws, that's where it steps over the line. And I think we've seen a little bit of that as far as the pushback from Congress, where there's actually been some cases go up to the U.S. Supreme Court talking about whether or not the president overstepped his presidential authority. And I would be all for more of that. I think we need to make sure that the president stays within his narrow scope of authority and that we do have the proper checks and balances and separations of power. And the Supreme Court, although maybe not necessarily the only recourse, is certainly one of the ways that we can get them involved to help keep the president in check.
Let me just go ahead and add this to that. We have to look at the word executive order and how it actually came about. The executive order was granted to the president among the early presidents to allow the president to communicate with the executive branch of government, to issue how the policies he wanted them to discuss certain items or address day-to-day business. Executive orders since that time have turned into this Frankenstein creation, like Dwayne said, that can circumvent Congress and make statute and law, which was never granted to the president or the executive branch under the U.S. Constitution. Now, Congress has the ability to challenge any executive order, any presidential memorandum by challenging it on the floor of the House. They can say, Mr. President, you need to come down and explain why you're doing this executive order and what you're planning on doing with it, and we're going to vote on it, and we're going to determine whether this is a good executive order or not. I see a lot of representatives, both on the Republican and Democratic side, whine on national TV about executive orders or presidential memorandums, but I've never seen one challenge it on the only place that matters, and that's the floor of the House.
Well, thank you both. We're going to go to a commercial break here, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion with Tim Aalders and Dwayne Vance, both running for Congress in their respective districts. We will be right back after these commercial breaks.
Mom, Dad, we need to talk. I know you love me.
And you want the best for me.
Including my future. And you know, I'm too young to have a vote. So I count on you to make sure you use your vote wisely. And to be honest, Mom and Dad, you haven't been doing a very good job.
In the last 36 years, our national debt has increased dramatically.
From about $68 billion
to more than $15 trillion.
I don't even know what a trillion is.
I already owe $48,000 myself.
I already owe $48,000, and I'm just a kid. I don't think I have that much in my piggy bank.
If you add in unfunded liabilities,
then I owe $189,000?
Do you really think that's fair?
But instead, the politicians in Washington are playing kick the can with our national debt.
I thought kick the can was for kids. Not the people in Washington. Not the people in Washington.
and they just keep kicking it further down the road each year.
Meaning I have to pay off that debt. Not you!
Not you. Every election you keep sending the same type of people back to Washington.
Time and time again.
And to be honest, Mom and Dad, it's like a broken record. The faces may change.
Sometimes they just don't change often enough.
But the results are pretty much the same. Look me in the eye and tell me honestly. Do you really think this is working out for me? The person you love. The person you love. The person you love. Do you think that this election year, you can do me a personal favor?
How about you try a different approach at the polls this year?
What if, when you cast your vote,
you thought of me?
And how will your vote affect me?
It's time for someone new. Someone who will watch out for my best interest.
Someone that will watch out for my best interest.
As well as yours.
We need someone to protect the people.
Someone who will actually care about the people they represent.
instead of just caring about their job in Washington.
If the future is supposed to belong to us kids, then please send someone back to Washington.
Who will help make sure I still have a future.
We don't need any more politicians.
We don't need any more politicians.
We need true representatives of the people.
People like me. People like me. People like me. And me.
And me.
And me.
People like us. Can I have my money back?